The New York Yankees, right. Everybody knows the name, but what makes them so legendary?
Well, get this. Their story actually starts all the way back in 1901.
1901,
It's
serious.
like they weren't even the Yankees back then.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Who were they?
They were the Baltimore Orioles. And no, not the same Orioles team we know today. Totally different story.
Huh, the Orioles. That's wild.
Yeah, so this team, they actually moved to New York in 1903 and became the Highlanders.
The Highlanders. That's such a weird name for a baseball team. Why'd they change it so many times? And why'd they even move in the first place?
Well, picture baseball over 100 years ago, you know. Teams back then, they weren't nearly as stable as they are now. Always on the move, constantly changing names. Everything was about finding the most devoted fans, maybe scoring a better deal on a stadium.
Makes sense, I guess. Times were different.
Oh yeah, way different. We're talking way before massive stadiums and huge TV deals, so teams, they had to be scrappy.
Wow, it's crazy how money, even back then, it really shaped everything, even team loyalty. But okay, so Highlanders, how'd they go from that to the Yankees?
So they were sharing a stadium, the Polo Grounds, with the New York Giants, but that Highlanders name, it just wasn't working. Then, 1913, bam, the New York Yankees are born.
Talk about a name change. It sounds so much more, I don't know, powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the sound. The newspapers ate it up. Way catchier, and let's be honest, way more intimidating.
The Yankees just commands respect, doesn't it? Hard to imagine them being called the Highlanders now.
Right. It just fits, especially with their early success. They were contenders right off the bat. They even came in second place a bunch of times. And get this, back in 1904, they set a record for the most wins in a single season.
Wait, 1904, we're talking over a century ago? Things must have been so different back then?
Oh, yeah, totally different game. That record was all thanks to their pitcher, Jack Chesbro. The guy managed to rack up 41 wins in a single season.
41 wins. That's insane. I mean,
Yeah.
is that even possible in today's game?
Not a chance. You see, back then, pitchers were practically workhorses. They'd pitch complete games all the time. But these days, teams, they're a lot more careful with their pitchers' arms. It's all about managing their workloads, making sure they don't get injured. It's a whole new ball game.
Makes sense. So even before they were the Yankees, they were a force to be reckoned with. But I have a feeling things really took off in the 1920s, right? Wasn't that when someone named Babe Ruth joined the team?
Ah, 1920, a huge turning point for the Yankees. That's when they got their hands on a player from the Red Sox.
I think I've heard of this guy, Babe Ruth, right?
Just a little. And let me tell you, getting Babe Ruth, it wasn't just about adding another player to the team. This single move, it practically changed the game of baseball. I mean, they didn't call him the Great Bambino for nothing.
Everyone's heard of Babe Ruth, but what made him so special? Was it just those legendary home runs?
Well, he was obviously a phenomenal hitter, but it was more than that. He represented a total shift in how the game was played. See, baseball used to be all about defense, keeping those scores low and slow. But then Babe Ruth steps onto the scene, and suddenly it's all about offense, about hitting those balls out of the park. He was charismatic. He was larger than life. People just had to see him play. Attendance records smashed. He became a national icon, a symbol of, American power,
And that's where that whole curse of the Bambino thing comes in, right?
Yeah.
Trading a player like that, it's got to have some kind of consequences.
Tell me about it. Red Sox fans, they still feel that curse to this day. For decades, they blamed the sale of Babe Ruth for their World Series drought. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It was like this weight hanging over them.
Well, it wasn't until 2004 that they finally broke that curse, right? It goes to show you how powerful those sports myths can be.
It's incredible, isn't it? The power of belief. But getting back to the Yankees, with Ruth on their side, they were on fire. And then there's that Murderer's Row lineup I've heard about. You don't get a nickname like that for just being okay at baseball. Oh, man, Murderer's Row. 1927. That lineup is still considered one of the best of all time. We're talking about a team so good, so powerful, that they were named after a section in a Manhattan jail.
That's intimidating.
And at the heart of it all, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. They were an unstoppable force. First team ever to hold first place every single day of the season. That was them. And of course, they clinched the World Series that year.
It sounds like they had an embarrassment of riches on that team. But it wasn't all just Babe Ruth, right? What about Lou Gehrig?
Lou Gehrig. Now, there's a story that goes beyond baseball. Gehrig's story, it's one of those moments that, just gets you right in the feels.
Right.
Imagine at the top of his game, giving his farewell speech at Yankee Stadium, no less. 1939.
Because of his ALS diagnosis.
Exactly.
Man, Every time I hear that speech, the luckiest man on the face of the earth, gives me chills. It really makes you think about what's important.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that being a great athlete, it's just one part of life.
Right. And speaking of great athletes, we can't forget about Jolton Joe DiMaggio. Talk about a legend on and off the field.
He was something else. The guy just oozed grace and style.
Yeah. And he was married to Marilyn Monroe. But what made him stand out as a player? I mean, the Yankees have had so many amazing players.
DiMaggio, he was just on another level. Phenomenal hitter, obviously, but his fielding, incredible. Made it all look so easy. But that 56-game hitting streak, 1941, that's what cemented his place in history.
56 games straight. Nobody's been able to beat that record.
It's considered one of those unbreakable records, you know? Just to give you an idea, the next longest hitting streak is only 44 games.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It really is. DiMaggio's streak. It's all about consistency, focus, raw talent. 56 games. The guy was unstoppable.
A true hitting machine. But the Yankees' winning streak, it didn't end with DiMaggio, did it? We got to talk about Mickey Mantle. He came onto the scene just as DiMaggio was retiring.
Talk about perfect timing. Mantle, or the Mick, as they called him, it was another one of those larger-than-life Yankees. Power, speed, the guy was electric.
And he pretty much picked up right where DiMaggio left off, becoming the new face of the Yankees.
Exactly. And then, of course, you got those 5 World Series wins in a row, 1949 and 1953. Nobody could touch them.
5 in a row. Still an MLB record.
That's still the record. And you know who was managing them during that run? Casey Stengel, known for being, let's just say, a little unconventional.
Casey Stengel sounds like quite a character. What made those teams so dominant? Was it just having amazing players?
Talent plays a big part, sure, but building a dynasty, it takes more than just talent, right? You need incredible coaching. That team chemistry has to be there. And yeah, a little luck never hurts. Those Yankees teams, they had it all.
They were at the top of their game for so long. But even the best teams have their ups and downs. What happened in the 60s and 70s?
Well, their reign did eventually come to an end, right? The 60s and 70s, those were rough years for the Yankees. They even ended some seasons with losing records. For the first time in decades, it was a combination of things, really. Star players, they're getting older, there were some changes in ownership, and then you have the rise of free agency. Changed everything.
Free agency, that's huge in any sport, really. Suddenly, players have so much more power, so much more say in their own careers.
Right. Before free agency, players were basically stuck with their teams, but with free agency, they could negotiate with other teams, try to get a better deal. It meant higher salaries for players and teams. They had to be a lot smarter about who they signed.
So free agency, it wasn't just about the Yankees having to adapt. It was the whole league.
Absolutely. And yeah, the Yankees, they struggled at first, but eventually they found their footing again. That's where George Steinbrenner comes in, the legendary owner. This is when he took over. And let me tell you, it was a wild time. People called it the Bronx Zoo era.
Bronx Zoo, I can only imagine.
Think about it, a team full of these big personalities, strong opinions, and then you've got Steinbrenner, who was not afraid to get involved. There were arguments, there were feuds, but there was also a ton of talent. This is when Reggie Jackson really made his mark.
Reggie Jackson, Mr. October, clutch player, especially in those postseason games.
Nobody wanted to face him when the stakes were high. And then, of course, there was Thurman Munson, a true fan favorite.
He was something special, wasn't he?
Munson, he was the heart and soul of those teams. Tough catcher, played with so much grit. He embodied what it meant to be a Yankee. Tragically, though, his life was cut short. That plane crash in '79, just awful.
Absolutely heartbreaking. For the team, for the fans.
Devastating loss. The Yankees, they retired his number 15 right away. And to this day, his locker in the clubhouse, it's still empty. A tribute to his memory.
That's really powerful. It says a lot about what he meant to the organization. But even with that tragedy, the Yankees, they kept going, kept proving they were a force to be reckoned with.
They won those back-to-back World Series in '77 and '78.
Yeah.
Showed the world that they could still dominate, even with all the changes happening in the game. But you know what I think is really interesting about the Yankees? They're more than just a baseball team, you know? They're like a cultural icon.
Yeah, their logos everywhere, hats, shirts, you name it.
It's global. They become synonymous with New York City, with success, with a certain attitude. Movies, TV shows, their players are household names. Their history is part of American sports history. You know what I mean?
They're practically a fashion statement now. And then there's that whole YMCA thing. How did that even happen?
Ah, that was Steinbrenner. He loved that song.
Yeah.
Had it played during games at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And it just took off. Became a thing at sporting events everywhere.
Who knew the Yankees were behind one of the most popular sports anthems out there? But it's not all sunshine and roses, is it? I've definitely heard my fair share of Yankees suck chants.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely a polarizing team.
Yeah.
Love them or hate them.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them so fascinating.
So what is it about the Yankees that gets people so riled up? I mean, they've got that reputation, don't they? The evil empire, right?
It's that air of, I don't know, invincibility, you know? Like they're always in it to win it.
And they've got the money to back it up, right? Big market team. They can afford to go after the best players.
That's definitely part of it. And some people see that as, well, unfair, like
Yeah.
they're buying their championships.
I can see that. But hey, that's baseball, right?
It's all part of the game. And let's be honest, it makes them even more fun to root against, right?
Totally. There's something satisfying about watching the underdog come out on top.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, love them or hate them, you got to admit, the Yankees are a fascinating study in how baseball's evolved over the years.
Totally. From those early days to now, free agency, mega deals, they've seen it all.
And adapted every step of the way. They've managed to stay relevant, kept winning. Makes you wonder what they'll do next.
Especially with baseball changing so rapidly, right? New strategies, new technologies, this whole new generation of players coming up.
Exactly. And you know what? The Yankees, they've always been a team that embraces change. They're not afraid to push the boundaries.
Well, they've got those baby bombers now, right? Aaron Judge, Gleyber Torres, they're adding their own chapters to the Yankees story.
And what a story it is. But it's not just about the Yankees, is it? It's about the legacy of baseball itself.
It's a sport that connects generations, brings people together, and the Yankees, they're right there in the thick of it.
More than just a team, really. They're a New York institution, a symbol of American sports. That drive to be the best, it's inspiring, even if you're not a Yankees fan.
Definitely. Their story, it makes you think, doesn't it? How have the Yankees shaped the game as we know it? What's their role in a sport that's constantly changing? Those are questions worth considering.
Absolutely. And as you learn more about the New York Yankees, just remember one thing. This is a team that continues to fascinate, inspire, and leave its mark on the game.
Because their story, it's far from over.
Not even close. It's still being written one game at a time.